Welcome to Scrolling to Death. Today, I am joined by mom, author, speaker, and ex-Snapchat executive Sarah Gallagher Trombley. Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
Thank you for being here today.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you, Nikki.
Yeah, and we're going to get into a lot of things today that are going to be helpful for parents. And I know that these days you're really focused on helping parents with the how and how to best manage our kids' use of all the various platforms and devices. And so we'll get to that. But if I can just get to know you a little bit first, tell me kind of your journey through the tech platforms and what roles you held.
Sure. So I have a 20-year career in media and tech. I started out in what I'd call traditional digital publishing, if that's a thing.
Yeah.
Working at companies like Condé Nast and Time Inc.
Mm-hmm.
I left the media side of digital publishing and then spent the last 10 years of that career in technology. So I worked first for a startup called Flipboard.
Mm-hmm.
Flipboard was one of the first iPad apps back when the iPad was brand new.
Mm-hmm.
And then I moved over to Snapchat and I worked there for about 5 years. I ran their media partnerships division.
Media partnerships. Okay. Snapchat is one of those platforms that, when I interview people and I'm like, what's your least favorite platform? They'll often say Snapchat just because a lot of the functionality makes it kind of unsafe for kids. For example, the disappearing messages makes it a platform where predators will go to target kids because the evidence of a crime disappears. Also, I've set up a couple test accounts, and this has been duplicated a lot. When you sign up as a teen and you start scrolling through the Spotlight algorithm, you end up seeing really inappropriate sexual content. And so I just have this perspective that they don't seem to care a lot about actually keeping our kids safe. I just wonder from the inside, was that a focus from your perspective? Was child safety part of the conversation, something you felt like was being prioritized within the company?
I think it is important to the company. It's certainly a topic that there's a lot of conversation about. At least there was when I was there.
Okay.
It was certainly taken seriously. But I will say, I think for Snapchat and really all of these tech companies, it's often looked at as much as a business problem as it is anything else. And oftentimes for folks who are solving algorithm problems, business problems, it all gets put into the language of trade-offs, which sounds kind of harsh.
Yeah.
But it really is, okay, it takes a lot of resources to build this protection in that's going to diminish viewership or reduce the number of eyeballs on things. And they're a business at the end of it, for better or worse, for good or ill. It's a business. And so all of those decisions, at least from my perspective, went through the lens of what will this do to growth? What will this do to revenue?
Mm-hmm.
What will this do to our business ultimately? And how much money can we spend on building the resources?
I think for parents, it's hard to process those decisions. Obviously, we understand that they need to make money and they want to grow and all of that. But when it's balanced against harming kids, that's when it can be really hard to understand the decisions. Do you think there was any improvement over time, given that Evan Spiegel, the CEO, ended up having several kids and kind of they're getting a bit older, and I don't see somebody like him letting his children use this type of platform given the risks. So do you feel like maybe they're starting to take it more seriously as they age, the company and the executives?
I do think they are. I do think these are concerns that can't be ignored.
Yeah.
The sheer number of lawsuits and, many of the stories that you've raised on this podcast make it really hard to say this is a very, very minor problem. I think that Snapchat, along with the other social media platforms, were acting slowly. It's hard to be the first to put some of these things in place because you're going to hurt your metrics before the competitors do. I imagine that might have been part of it. But I do think that they're all having a reckoning in this moment. And each one of the platforms I've seen add controls even in the last year that are better. To be clear, there is still so much more I think that all of the platforms can and should be doing. Parental controls are far from complete on any social media platform. And I also think a big part of the problem is the age of consent online, the fact that the App Store is basically the honor system.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really hard to regulate that if it's not regulated in the stores where the apps are available.
Yep.
But to me, that's an everyone problem. That's an App Store problem and a platform problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think they're all sort of waiting for the other to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I would say platforms are improving, but there's still a long way to go for sure.
And let's talk about a little bit more about the parental controls in general, because it's a great way to not have to make design-specific changes that protect kids by just putting more responsibility on the parents. Roblox, for example, a big report came out last year by Hindenburg Research, basically fully calling Roblox a pedophile hellscape for children, pointing out all these horrific things that were happening and kids were being exposed to. And in response to that, within weeks, they had updated their parental controls. So rather than take responsibility for the bad stuff on their platform, just putting that responsibility back on parents. So number one, do you agree that revamping and adding more parental controls is just putting the responsibility off of the companies and onto parents?
I think it's a yes and situation. Okay. I think absolutely parental control should be there and, sort of dignity by design needs to be there as well. Mm-hmm. I think there are components to parental controls that allow parents to see what's going on, which I think is immensely valuable and help their kids with time management and those sorts of things. But that doesn't cure the platform from the ills that can befall any child. I still think there should be much stricter gates. It should be much harder for a 12-year-old to find their way onto a social media platform if platform is registered in the App Store as being 13 plus.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be possible.
Right. And we can definitely
really shouldn't.
We can definitely talk about the App Store because I've been really spending a lot of time thinking about that. And there's a new bill called the App Store Accountability Act, which actually allows parents to approve whether their kids get access and if they're minors, among other things like making sure the apps are rated appropriately, which is a big problem too. You were involved and around when Snapchat was developing and implementing parental controls for the first time. Are Snapchat parental controls something that parents can rely on?
No,
okay.
I wouldn't say so. I think, the prevailing wisdom at the time when I was at Snapchat was the open question of whether parents would actually even use them or not. Many executives didn't think they would. That is actually borne out to be true. Very few people use the parental controls. But it's a little bit of a chicken or an egg scenario. I would argue they're not really that helpful. So parents should use them the same way. If you're going to allow your child on Snapchat, you should be on there too, because you should be up in it, involved in it, and know how it works. But you have to do so much more than just what those parental controls can allow you to do in order to actually make it safer. And it can never be safest. It's as safe as it can be given the current state, limitations of the app, limitations of parental controls, and limitations of other platforms and technologies to help you. But it's not appropriate for kids. It just isn't.
Okay, so you would recommend parents keep their kids off of Snapchat. We can talk about other platforms too, but for Snapchat specifically, you would recommend parents keep their kids off all the way through childhood?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. My children won't get it until they're 16, at least.
Okay. Yeah. I hear a lot of 16 or 18, kind of, we'll reassess at 16.
I think that's right. I think at 16, I'm teaching kids how to figure things out, how to be preparing for the adult world. Much of the content you see on social media is not really appropriate for kids under 16, in my opinion.
I agree. We are simultaneously working on getting laws passed to force these companies to be safer given the failures of the parental controls and the initiation of any actual child safety measures over profit. Full countries like Australia have banned social media now under 16. And I've seen the social media companies feel that pressure of potential regulation. And it feels like they really ramped up their PR plays and their marketing to make it just seem as safe as possible. And one of the things I noticed Snapchat do is really dig in and say, we are not social media and, the billboards and everything. And so I wonder if you would categorize Snapchat as social media.
I mean, I remember my first day of orientation, it's in the filing paperwork. They're a camera company. that is what they claim to be.
Okay.
To qualify as social media for me,
Yeah.
for the lens I put this through, you need to have like 2 out of 3 of the following. You either need to have content, a way to push content out broadly, a way to consume a content feed, and a way to message. So if you've got 2 of those, 2 of the 3, to me, you're social media.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
YouTube, actually, until Shorts came about, wasn't really social media. I now consider it social media because it has a scrolling feed.
Right.
Instagram has all of them. TikTok has all of them. Technically under 16, you can't message, but for all intents and purposes, it has all of the equipment and channels to be. Snapchat has 2 out of 3. Snapchat certainly has the messaging piece, right? And certainly has a way to consume content. Now, do a lot of people consume content on there? That's a question. I don't think that's the biggest part of the app, but it's social media.
Yeah, I agree. And I would add like user-generated content, just to differentiate from other media, right? Like Disney Plus content is created by producers and it has ratings, where this is all YouTube, and all of this Snapchat is all content created by the users. Thank you for clarifying that, because that was tough to see those billboards off the freeway saying less social media, more Snapchat. What did you feel about that whole tagline and campaign?
Yeah, I mean, I know that the sort of operating principles, the founding principles of Snapchat do come from a kind place. It is supposed to be about friendship. It is supposed to be about really close connections and the ability to be vulnerable with your friends. That tracks for me to a limited extent. As the company's had to grow, and it is, needing more broad-based content to attract more users and folks to have more connections to be sort of a vital messaging app, it loses a little bit of that. And then that's where I think that it doesn't ring as true anymore. Because the truth is, the folks I know that use Snapchat aren't just snapping with their 3 best friends. And the kids I know that are using it especially are, as much as any other platform, trying to attract as many connections on there as possible. And you can't see there's a follower, so you can't see that metric.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean kids aren't still trying to broaden their circles as much as possible.
And I know they're rewarded through how many days in a row they interact with people on Snapchat, through streaks. But are they also rewarded by how many friends they've added? Is that a reward function?
Not that I'm aware of, as in terms of how the inner workings of the app are, but I do think that's just personal social cachet.
Yeah, totally.
That you're connected, you can say you're connected to all these people is still a thing that kids will talk about.
Can you talk a little bit more about how you talked about, the operating principles of Snapchat you feel did come from a kind place. But if you track way back to when it was started and was called Peekaboo and was created by college frat boys to be able to send nude imagery back and forth and have it not be saved, have it disappear. And that is still the main function. The disappearing messages is still the base function of the platform, and the one that I talked about before that causes a lot of the harm to kids. How do you justify kind of that? How do we get away from the fact that was the baseline function and was for bad, not good, and that is still in place and harming kids? Like, how do we see that as a good through line?
I don't think I have an answer to that.
Okay.
I would agree. I think the same reason that creeps are attracted to Snapchat is the same reason kids are attracted to Snapchat. You can get up to all sorts of things that you don't want other people to see.
Hence why you don't feel that it's safe for kids.
It's not safe for kids. One of the biggest reasons I don't think it's safe for kids is because the grownups aren't on there. The number of parents and peers I know who are like, I couldn't figure it out.
Right.
It's the navigation's complicated. It's not for me. Makes it more attractive to kids because they can have sort of a free place to message however they want to message. They can save pictures to the My Eyes Only camera roll that no parent knows exists unless I tell them.
Isn't that crazy? Yeah, so there's a PIN protected, right? My Eyes Only data vault where kids can hide things from their parents. Why does that exist, Sarah?
I couldn't tell you the specific answer on why, but it is the first thing I show parents in almost all of my speaking events, whether it's on that topic of Snapchat or not. Just, I feel like every parent needs to know it exists.
Yeah.
And if you open your child's Snapchat and there's a password that means they're using it.
Wow.
And you need to have a conversation about what they're storing in there.
Yeah. Among so many other things. Just the anonymization of it in general, the fact that kids cannot use a real photo for their profile image, that they're forced to use a Bitmoji, which is like a cartoon version of themselves. And I've seen a lot of these predators that have targeted kids, like their booking photo, they're like this horribly scary man next to their Bitmoji, and they look like a little teen boy. And of course, kids are going to fall victim to somebody that looks so innocent.
Yep.
So it's just these decisions that you're like, if you talk it through, you're like, this isn't a good idea, putting kids together with adults that look to be kids as well, you know?
Right. I mean, I think the whole best practices on profiles is sort of a universal problem. Whether your child is setting up an account on Roblox or on Instagram, they should not be using their real face. They should not be using details that make it obvious of their age or their zip code or the school that they go to,
that's
or
true,
any of those like identifying like elements. What I often say to parents too, and again, this is true of Snapchat or any social media, you shouldn't be connected to anybody you don't know in real life. Like if you can't tell me who that person is as your parent, then I'm pretty freaked out that you're connected to them on a social media platform where you can message them.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's not a good thing.
Yeah.
And it's true. It is absolutely true that predators will use a logo from a high school or other, identifying elements to make it look like they go to your school or the next town over or whatever it is. And it takes one kid who thinks they might know that person and maybe connects. And then everybody else is like, oh, well, if so-and-so does, then they must be fine for someone to infiltrate a real friend group.
Yeah.
Predator to infiltrate a friend group.
Yeah. And that's like with Roblox, you can have a private, or a Discord, for example, you can have a private group where you're like, my kid's only talking to their friends, but it just takes one other friend to connect with one stranger and invite them in. And now there's a predator in the group. Very, very easily.
That's right.
Okay, to wrap up on your time at Snapchat, can you share why you left?
Yeah. So I'd been there for 5 years. There are a couple of reasons I left. So one was I worked very much focused on the Discover content tab. When we started Discover, it was almost entirely professional content. So we worked with publishers that you would have heard of, the New York Times, Cosmopolitan Magazine, the Daily Mail, those sorts of bigger brands.
Yeah.
But the world was changing and Spotlight had launched and they were starting to bring more user-generated content onto the surface. And that's not the area of the business that I was super passionate about. So that was a moment for me to sort of reassess whether this was the type of content I wanted to continue to work in. Did I want to learn a new area?
Yeah.
But I was also frustrated with the conversations about safety. My kids were little at the time. When I left, they were still lower elementary school, so they're nowhere near close to Snapchat age. But I wasn't sure where the parental control conversations were going to go.
And you felt like there was nothing you could do to make a big enough difference within the company.
No, and it's, I worked on the content side of the business. So those parental controls have a lot more to do with the communication side. That wasn't a part that I had a huge role to play in. And I was craving another chapter for my story. And, literally at the same time watching my kids get swallowed by the YouTube algorithm. So it felt like a moment where I wanted to do something on my own and I wanted to start sharing what I knew with other parents. I mean, that was the other thing in my personal life. Every day on the playground after school or at pickup, every conversation was, I found my kid doing this, or this is happening in my house with the iPad and I don't know what to do. And I shared the same concerns, only I was like, I think I can figure this out. I think I have enough of a background in technology that as I walk through these challenges at home, I can start sharing with other parents as I learn and offering a little extra insight. So that was the challenge I put out to myself that I really wanted to do. I wanted to put some good into the world and try to be a helper.
Yeah. And that's what we'll focus on now is how to help parents. It sucks, though, that we have to put this responsibility on parents, but that's kind of was your journey. Like you gave up on the company being able to make it safe from the inside and realizing that it's a lot about right now parents' choices and parents educating their kids and having these conversations and using what's available, but knowing where the limitations are as well.
Yeah.
So given that, you already shared this social media you don't believe is safe for minors, period. But the fact is that most kids are still using it. Most parents are still giving them access. But there's no completely safe way for our kids to use social media. There's just using what is available to us to do our best to keep them safe. Like, can you speak to that a little bit? Yes, we should keep them off, but why is it also important to have conversations kind of about this and do our due diligence as parents?
Yeah, I mean, in an ideal world, we're all aligned and
Right.
we're keeping our kids out of these adult spaces, but I think that's the best place to start.
Mm-hmm.
Social media wasn't designed for kids.
Mm-hmm.
It was never supposed to be in the hands of kids. One of the tips I give parents a lot who are struggling with the 11-year-old or 12-year-old that wants it is that the App Store says you have to be 13. We don't lie in our house, which means I can't allow you to lie to get on there.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that works 100% of the time,
Yeah.
but it's a good starting place.
Yeah.
The things about social media that are concerning, there's so many layers to it. One is all of these apps are designed they're like a multi-tool. It says many different exciting things for you to do so that you stay there for as long as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And handing something like that to a kid in these early years where, and I can say this because we just got through 6th grade. That's the first year of middle school for my son. There's a lot to learn
Mm-hmm.
about time management
Mm-hmm.
and executive functioning and systems to keep yourself organized and on track and focused.
Yeah.
Handing kids these multi-tools of distraction at these exact moments when you're trying to teach them how to focus and really learn how to sit
Mm-hmm.
and do work and plan ahead is really challenging. So from just a baseline, everybody as they go through these years is sort of training their brains for study and critical thinking and all those things.
Mm-hmm.
The fewer distractions you can put in front of a kid, the better.
Yeah.
That's a general comment on all of the technology, but social media in particular, because it's one of those things as an adult, you may go to check one little thing and then you've been sucked in for how long. It happens to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something we don't really talk about enough. And then there's the individual activities in social media that are all dangerous on their own and then sort of have a multiplier effect when they're together.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a ton of content that goes through any social media feed. I can tell you from the work I did with content moderation and trust and safety that it's impossible with the billions of pieces of content that flow through any social platform to get coverage, 100% coverage over everything all the time.
Mm-hmm.
If nothing else, if you have a middle school child who speaks to you in brain rot, you know how quickly language evolves. So words that didn't mean anything yesterday all of a sudden take on a new meaning today. Who could possibly keep up with that? What AI tool, machine learning, anything can adapt to that in real time? It's going to take a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody has to identify it as a thing, identify it as a problem, go back and retrain an algorithm. It takes time.
Yeah.
So it's just not perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And content creators are also clever and will do what they can to sneak things by.
Yeah.
Because anything that's a little spicy
Mm-hmm.
will perform better.
Yeah.
And that's just the way any platform is set up,
Mm-hmm.
right? Everything goes to more extreme views or more exciting content or racier, edgier.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the things that tend to perform the best. So the content piece is like a whack-a-mole situation.
Yeah.
And to say nothing of how addictive it can be to just sit there with a scrolling feed.
Yeah.
And then there's the messaging side of it too, where no social media platform has adequate tools for monitoring messaging.
Mm-hmm.
I talk a lot about this group chat, social media chat, video game chat, all of it needs to be better regulated if kids are involved.
Yeah.
These shouldn't be private, closed-door conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Text messaging is like a new form of communication, right? For
Mm-hmm.
kids. It was for us too.
Yeah.
Kids don't know how to do it. Kids don't know how to do it properly. There's so much nuance and subtlety. And then you can layer on top of that the fact that strangers may be in there too. There's no reason why these things shouldn't be more regulated than they are. And they're completely not regulated.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot look at the messages on Snapchat
Mm-hmm.
unless you open your child's Snapchat. Same for Instagram, same for any of them. And that's a problem, especially when they're young,
Mhm.
especially when they don't know how to do it, especially when they're not going to know the difference between a kid they just don't know that well and an actual stranger.
Yeah.
And then there's the whole like wanting to put content out there in the world and get validation
Mhm.
in a way that isn't authentic
Mhm.
and does weird things to your own self-esteem.
Yeah.
And again, kids going through puberty at those moments when they're so vulnerable,
Mhm.
exposing them like that to the opinions of strangers on social media is really risky. People are mean.
Mhm.
People are really mean on the internet.
Yeah.
And it's just not something I don't think kids need to be in front of.
Yeah. And even I interviewed a 22-year-old, I believe, the other day, and she was talking about how now she doesn't use social media, but during her teen years, first of all, she said having social media as a teenager is a full-time job, except you
Mhm.
don't get paid and there's no benefits.
Mhm.
And she called it like playing chess as far as like you're socializing your whole life, because everyone's always got a phone up. So you have to be careful about what you say. People are constantly posting pictures of you that you didn't know they took, and then you have to ask them to take it down, and then they might not. And so just the anxiety I was getting from hearing her describe
Mhm.
how being a teen was with social media involved. I was like, you poor, poor thing. And she's like, but I was downright indignant at the time. If you told me it wasn't good for me, like I would disagree. I would say I had complete control
Right.
over her activity on there, which we know is just not true. And that's why social media companies hire like neuroscientists and psychologists to help get deep into these kids' brains. I want to talk a little bit about devices specifically, but first I'm going to list off a major social media platform, and you can just let me know like what comes to mind for parents to know about it, like one
Okay.
thing to take today. So let's start with Instagram.
Instagram, I would say, is as dangerous as Snapchat when it comes to strangers. And I would say that the content is particularly dangerous for girls
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to comparison culture.
Any thoughts on their teen accounts?
I think it's a nice step forward. It's not nearly enough.
Okay.
They're signaling that they're trying,
Mm-hmm.
but until Instagram actually allows you to monitor messages as an adult, it's not going to feel safe.
Yeah.
In my book.
Okay. We've talked a lot about Snapchat. Anything else you want to share about Snapchat that we didn't talk about?
I would say the two things parents need to know about Snapchat is that My Eyes Only exists, and if the password has been set up, that means your child's storing content in there, and also that the map is dangerous. There is no parental control to compel your child to turn off the map. You can ask them to do it, but they can turn it back on the second you walk away. And although only their friends can see their location, if you don't know who all the friends are, then there could very well be strangers in there too. That's how a lot of drug deals go down, from what I understand.
Yeah. So instigating real world crimes and harm to children, let alone you just knowing where all of your real friends are and the FOMO, and you were
Yep.
invited and they're all why is my boyfriend at that house? And
Mhm.
it's like nothing good for me that comes from minors being able to view and access live locations. Do you agree?
I know that their most recent update to parental controls, I believe they've allowed it so that parents can see the location of their kids. So you could almost use Snapchat as a GPS tracker,
Okay.
but it doesn't protect them from exposing their location to others.
Okay.
And that to me is the bigger, more important component that I wish they would build
Uh-huh.
into the parental controls.
And that just feels like a function to make it stickier so that parents will use that for geolocating rather than and I don't know, whatever tool they might use. Okay. Let's do two more platforms. So what about TikTok?
So TikTok, for my money, I would say actually has the most robust parental controls of all of the apps.
Mm-hmm.
I think they've done the most work there. You can't actually send direct messages unless you're over 16. But I would also say they have the best algorithm, and that's not a compliment.
Yeah. Most addictive.
It is it is the most uncanny algorithm at predicting things that will keep you there for a very long time.
And I'm just so worried about the data collection that happens there. Like when I won't download it to my phone even for a test account, because what you are agreeing to is for them to track keystrokes on all of your devices that are connected to that phone. And why? What?
I know it's all alleged at this point, but it's really something to be concerned about.
Yeah. I mean, our own government is calling that platform a national security risk. I know there's been some.
Right. Government employees aren't allowed to download it. I
Right.
think that tells you something significant.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
for sure. Okay. Okay. And then lastly, let's just touch on YouTube again.
If YouTube didn't have shorts, I'd be actually much more okay with YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
I have come to accept that this generation of kids watches content differently than I did.
Mm-hmm.
So long form YouTube shows or accounts may not be my taste, but I can recognize the interest for my children.
Yeah.
But I full stop at YouTube Shorts. YouTube Shorts is fully social media.
Mm-hmm.
It is a scrolling feed, just like TikTok, just like Instagram. It is super addictive, and there is no way to turn it off. And I find it intensely problematic because many kids start on YouTube very young, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can have a supervised account. You can have YouTube kids super young. You can be on a supervised account, I think, as young as 7.
Mm-hmm. And
because of shorts, you're essentially priming your children for social media at a really young age.
And I read a stat recently about cyberbullying and how actually there's more cyberbullying that occurs on YouTube than any other platform. And that's interesting because there's no messaging. So that means within the comments.
It's in the comments.
Yeah. And I will say, as far as me having a platform with videos out on different platforms, the YouTube comments that come in are the most horrific. Like I can't even click on that notification button anymore because I'm like, what are these type of people that are commenting on this platform? It's just pretty shocking.
It has a huge base, maybe the biggest, but people feel very free there to troll.
I think one part of it might be because no one really uses their name. It's like the most anonymized. And so
I think that's right.
Maybe it's that. And a lot of parents, like you said, do give their kids access to YouTube really young, particularly because there's a YouTube Kids option. Any thoughts on YouTube Kids, if it's safe or not?
So I think YouTube Kids is safe-ish.
Okay.
No matter what, with content consumption on any of these platforms, you need to be careful. You're better off setting up YouTube Kids than being on unrestricted adult YouTube. Right. That's for sure.
Right.
Kids will also feel like they've outgrown YouTube Kids pretty quickly. At least that happened in my house. So I don't expect parents to watch every last piece of content with their kids because there's not enough hours in the day for many families. But I think having practices where, first of all, if you're watching YouTube on any surface, it should be logged into the proper person's account, like not on grandma's TV with no account set up, so you're on unrestricted.
Yeah.
And it has to kind of be open and notorious, so it's only watched in the living room where anyone can walk in, not with headphones, not behind closed doors in bedrooms, those sorts of things. Important to review the accounts that they're watching. You have to watch some of it.
Yeah.
But if they're going to watch a new account, they have to talk to you about it. You have to know what it is. Things slip by. No, I don't believe any content moderation system for user-generated content is fail-safe.
And I think if you can, no user-generated content for kids at all. Like do Netflix Kids or Disney Plus. I mean, those at least, not the most educational content, but those are, again, created by companies with ratings and oversight. And
I think that's right. Yeah. I think you start with those. If you want to show them something on YouTube, that's one thing. Yeah. But just letting them sit there with the account open is risky.
Yeah. Okay, let's just talk about a couple of device type decisions parents are having to make. Most parents start with a watch. Lots of parents around me with kids that are 7, 8 are talking about getting their kid their first watch. A lot of times that is an Apple Watch because that's what the parents use, Apple, and it integrates seamlessly. Generally, what are your thoughts on giving kids Apple Watches? Not kid-safe watches, but like a smartwatch.
The Apple Watch is a smartphone.
Thank you.
It is the same operating system. It is the same parental controls. It's just a tinier screen. So all of the things that you have to worry about with an iPhone, you have to worry about with the watch. They can absolutely get onto the internet. They can absolutely download apps. There's all sorts of sneaky ways with the Apple universe to get to apps and to the internet. And it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
So is it better than a smartphone or an iPhone? I guess so. Yes,
right.
Maybe. But also not really. And if you have a young kid who is texting, a social kid, it's now buzzing consistently on their watch, on their wrist.
Yeah.
And that can be anxiety inducing and incredibly distracting. My recommendation is if you are going to take steps into this world, you need to get really clear on what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, great.
And then pick appropriate technology, not the other way around.
Yeah.
It's actually not easier to give your kid the thing you know how to use right now because you're not a child that needs parental controls.
Right. Right. Totally.
So you don't really know, and it's actually not easier. Locking down the Apple universe is one of the hardest things you can choose to do as a grown-up.
Okay. Right. And I saw last week, was it that Snapchat released on the Apple Watch? So now, it's not the images, but you can message through your Snapchat account. On the Apple Watch, you can access YouTube and the internet, like you said. It's very much akin to a smartphone, which is why if you feel like you've assessed the reasons why your kid needs a watch of some kind, I highly recommend looking into Bark or Gab or any of the kids-safe watch companies who give parents a lot of control and oversight.
Yes.
Okay.
There are devices out there that were designed for kids of this age.
Yeah.
And you are far better served using one of those companies than you are trying to retrofit an adult device and put it in the hands of your child.
Yeah. Okay. So probably the last question, like how would the on-ramp look to you in the ideal world to a phone? Obviously they're going to become an adult and they're likely going to have a full-blown smartphone. Although some adults are not doing that, but likely they're going to have an iPhone or Android phone. So how can we best guide them through that in the safe way?
Yeah. I mean, I think, again, it really starts with, first of all, I don't think you're purchasing one device and it's going to get you through like many, many years of your child. I think each step lasts a couple of years, hopefully.
Okay, yep.
And you have to have a bit of a flexible, which is expensive. But you have to have a flexible mindset that sometimes the needs of your child will change. Sometimes their ability to work with the technology you gave them may not work. And so you have to reserve the right to change your mind and sometimes backtrack.
Yep.
If you're ready to give your child steps to independence, so maybe you're in elementary school and it's a community where they can walk to and from school or start to arrange their own play dates and you need a way to get in touch with them, that's an appropriate reason to have a piece of technology for communication. But that technology doesn't need to be access to every single person in their grade on a group chat necessarily, or, access to an entire phone book.
Yeah.
So starting with a smartwatch in upper elementary school, I think is appropriate. And then for some kids, it's not necessary. So that's okay too. I would avoid group chat for as long as you can. It's actually really damaging in elementary school. I can tell you that my phone is ringing off the hook as a speaker with third grade parents, fourth grade parents, who are in hot water with their kids are in a lot of difficult situations because the entire grade's on the group chat and it's not going well.
Wow.
Kids are being awful to each other, and there's not enough oversight because it's really hard to do.
Let alone the fact that their phone or the watch is probably dinging 4,000 times a day if there's that many people on a chat.
Either you're observing somebody else being awful,
right,
or you're not able to get to the device because your parents have limited the time and the thing's just dinging relentlessly and you can't get to it. There's all sorts of ways it's problematic.
Yeah. When
you're that little, your in-group is your family. That's who you spend most of your downtime with and should. It's not to say you shouldn't be with your friends, but you don't need to be tied to them 24/7 when you're that little. So a watch, if you need it in upper elementary school, if you can get away with a watch like that through early middle school, that's amazing. That's probably not likely for a lot of kids. I will tell you, in our situation, my son went to middle school for 6th grade this year. He was not a kid that was into texting at all. And I actually wanted to give him a device because I didn't want to be in the business of arranging his play dates or hangs. We call them hangs now that we're in 6th grade.
Yeah, it is a lot of work.
I wanted him to start doing that for himself, right? He actually needed a little bit of a nudge into being a little more social.
Sure.
And so I gave him a parent-managed phone. He had the Gizmo watch, which is great for just parent-child communication, but that's the one of the kids' smartwatches that isn't great for texting a few friends.
Okay.
That piece is harder.
Okay.
Because if he'd had a different watch, I might have stretched it a bit longer, but we were where we were. So we gave him the pinwheel phone, which is one of the parent-managed phones, like the Bark, the Trombley, the Gab, and pinwheel are the 4. I could start it without group chat enabled. I could start it without MMS enabled.
Mhm.
And we practiced. We literally practiced text messaging.
Yeah.
He had to text with me for a while.
Mhm.
And you can see quickly if you do that with a kid just how much they don't, and how could they know? They've never done it before.
Right. Totally.
But when you don't respond right away, they're confused. What
Wow.
that feels
Yeah.
like the first time,
Yeah.
is something wrong? No, I was just changing the laundry.
Right.
After a couple of months of that, I turned on the messaging, but I can see his messages.
Uh-huh.
And I can't tell you the number of times I have seen, just remember, my mom can totally read this text in the chain. And I'm like, good. I kind of want them to know I'm here.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to think twice before they say something they shouldn't, because it lasts forever.
Yeah. And that's protective. That's a protective function that I think is important at these younger ages. Like maybe we back off of that a little bit at 15,
Exactly.
16, 17, those kind of like a little privacy then, but
1,000%. I don't plan to read all of his messages until he goes to college.
Right.
And, at this point, in the beginning, I looked at it every single day, and don't tell him I don't look at it every single day anymore, but I still scan them. And over time, it will be less and less because I'm not trying to overprotect, but I'm trying to coach. And at a certain point, it is his responsibility to be on his own. So that's that's sort of a walk he's taking slowly.
Yeah.
He knows he's not getting social media anytime soon. He's accepted that fact.
Yeah.
And we will revisit the smartphone thing in 8th grade. I reserve the right to say I don't know yet.
Yeah.
And I really don't. I don't believe in taking super hard lines on everything. Things can change, but certainly the perspective is to delay as long as we can. I also am lucky in this case. I have a child who isn't particularly tech motivated. And I would say advice to all parents, especially of young kids, you don't know yet if you have a super tech motivated kid.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you might know if you definitely already do.
Right. I do. I have one. Yeah.
So like that you might know, but there are plenty of kids who aren't really that into it yet. And you won't know until they have stepped into that friend group, and they're in a friend group where everybody's really trying to get on a certain app, or everybody's really into texting, or whatever the norms are for that friend group can drastically change the experience for your child.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you just don't know yet. So I think all parents are far better served using age-appropriate technology, like technology designed for that age group, and then releasing permissions over time than trying to start with the thing that can do everything.
Yeah.
And trying to clamp it all the way back, because it's too hard.
Yeah, I agree. And I like the thought of like having hard lines, but knowing that there's some flexibility, because I think we don't know what's going to change legislation-wise or new products. And so, and then also letting your kid know that you're learning about this as we go. There's more information coming out, and sharing that with them. Like you're in it together in this journey, just simply trying to keep them safe and healthy. And so that's the baseline of the decisions that you're making, but you want to know how it makes them feel and navigate this as a team so that they continue to come to you if they are having real issues, because these mental health struggles for teens can be very scary. And so we want to like have those lines of communication wide open.
It's so important. I think that's maybe the most important component of all of this. The technology supports your parenting, but it can't be your parenting. The most important thing is how you're communicating with your kids about it. Starting from when they're little, but all the way through. We have this thing I always say to my kids, and they're like so sick of hearing it, which means I'm saying it enough. And that is, I always say to them, I want you to bring me the weird stuff, whatever that is.
Interesting. Yeah.
Johnny on the playground told you something and it doesn't sound right, or you were on a school bus and you saw something, or a friend's house and you heard something from an older brother or sister, whatever it is. I want to fill in the context for you.
Yeah.
Because no offense, sometimes your friends don't have the whole story because they're also kids.
Yeah.
And not in a shameful way, but just I want to fill in the blanks so you know what that is.
Yeah.
And so that you feel like you can talk to me, because I can't be everywhere and I don't want to police every moment of their lives.
Yeah.
And they're definitely going to be exposed to things I wish they weren't younger than I think they should.
Right.
Because that's just the world. And the only really way you can inoculate your kids from it is to help them understand it.
Yeah, totally. And I love letting them know like they can come to you with things that make them feel weird, or the weird stuff through technology or in real person relationships. But also those parental controls are so important, because a lot of the stories I've heard with kids, kids don't know a wrong thing sometimes when they're faced with it, especially if they're, being groomed or something and this seems to be their friend. They don't recognize it as wrong until it's sort of too late in that conversation. And so I think that balance of the parental controls, so things get flagged, like with Pinwheel, I'm assuming it sends alerts when there's some kind of issue. A lot of those tools do that, but then also making sure your kid can come to you with something that makes them feel uncomfortable and you're not going to shame them or take the device away. Like, we're going to work through
that's
it.
it.
Yeah.
And you're empowering them to like listen to their own bodies and their own feelings. Like, that pit in your stomach where you're like, I'm not sure if I should do that, or that doesn't feel like, listen to that.
Right. Completely.
And then come to me with it and I'll help you make sense of it.
Yeah.
And we talk about a lot how there's like a lot of creeps on the internet. You just don't know who's a creep.
Yeah. Scary out
We'll
there.
just flat out say that.
Yeah.
And like, there's a lot of questionable content on YouTube and there's a lot of creeps on the internet. That's why we have the rules that we do. That's why I check the things that I check. And that's why I want you to talk to me about it. So I can help you make sense of what's real and what's danger and what's not.
Yeah, I'm so glad we're closing out on conversations, because that's always the part I try to leave people with, is the most important protective factor for raising our kids in this digital age. Let listeners know where they can best connect with you. I know you have a Substack, so if you can plug that as well.
Yeah. So generally speaking, you can find me at my website, which is digitalmom.me.
Okay.
But I do have a Substack newsletter called Thoughts from a Digital Mom, where I give a lot of how-to tips for parents on all of the different surfaces we talked about here and more. So you can find me there, and I'm on Instagram and TikTok and all the things. That account's at Digital Momming, so you can find me there as well.
Okay, Sarah, thank you first for sharing some of your personal experiences as a mom of kids at that age that we're all struggling through, but also for speaking up as a former tech executive that was within these companies having these conversations. I know parents, on behalf of parents, we're so grateful to people like you who have the strength to do that, because that can be really hard. And I know that there's some consequences to that often for, whistleblowers or anybody that speaks up after being within these companies. And so I just want to say I'm grateful to you for speaking out and helping parents to navigate this space. So thank you.
Thank you. This was a great conversation. I'm really glad for the opportunity.
Yeah.